Hello y'all, and welcome to YoungFolk Knits. Today let's chat all about those colorwork patterns you didn't know you needed. Hello y'all, and welcome back to YoungFolk Knits. My name is Casey, and on this channel I mainly like to chat all about my love for fiber arts. So there's lots of knitting. Sometimes there's sewing, crochet, spinning, and whatever else I might get up to around here. Sometimes I also share a little bit about living on a farm here in Arkansas, where my husband and myself and our children are beekeepers. We love raising chickens and gardens and animals and spending time outdoors here in the foothills of the Ozarks. So if any of that sounds like it might be your cup of tea, make sure and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on any new video content. Today, however, I wanted to talk very specifically about some colorwork patterns. Now, whenever I say the word colorwork, some of you will sigh with joy and some of you will sigh in terror. Colorwork is definitely something that people seem to have a love or hate relationship with. It is absolutely gorgeous. There's nothing quite like it in knitting or crochet. It's beautiful, it's special, it's eye-dazzling, and it's something that many knitters usually aspire to whenever they first begin knitting. And also there's a lot of different levels of colorwork. So while some of it may be a little bit harder to wrap your head around, there's a lot of colorwork patterns that really are as simple as knitting stockinette. And the rest is just pretty much somewhere in between. So there are quite a few different kinds of colorwork. First of all, stranded colorwork, which is where you have multiple balls or colors of yarn, and as you go through a single row of your knitting, you're going to be knitting with both or however many colors that involves. It could be 3, it could be 4, hopefully it's 2. If you have more than that, it's not very fun. But that is what stranded colorwork is. You're stranding those colors all along through the entire row. Mosaic knitting, however, is where you have multiple colors, but you only knit with one of them per row. And the stitches that you are not knitting with the other color on that specific row, you slip those stitches and then you'll go back and knit them as you work that row again a second time with your other color. So that's a little bit of a difference between stranded and mosaic. There's also intarsia. Intarsia is a kind of colorwork that utilizes more of a big chunk of one color at certain areas. So much so that pretty much that one color just stays in that one big chunk and is not stranded all the way around the row. So you'll use your background color and knit to where that secondary contrast chunk of color begins. And usually you wrap those two yarns together and then you stop knitting with your background color and begin knitting the stitches you are supposed to in your pattern for your contrast color. And then you will stop with the contrast color and you sort of wrap it around a new ball of yarn for the same color of your background, and you continue knitting with the background color but from a new ball of yarn. So there's lots of different ways to achieve color work, and the one that is utilized for a specific pattern really depends on what the graphic of your pattern looks like. Oh, and of course we can't forget stripes. Today it has a little bit of everything, but mainly stranded color work. I am including a few patterns from different categories of color work, but these are just mainly some color work patterns I find extremely interesting, extremely versatile, something that I think everyone could pick from to have in their wardrobe, and that I think are really fun to knit. So let's jump right in and round some of these patterns up. First of all, let's start with the pullovers, because let's be honest, most knitters are pullover lovers. When it comes to socks and hats and shawls, either you love making them or you hate making them. I like making them, so I'm definitely got some of each of those. But let's start with the pullovers because everybody likes to knit a pullover. One of the first patterns I want to chat about is a pattern that I have had on my list and I desperately want to make. It is called the Geometer pattern, and it's designed by Lotta Laltegren. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I'm sorry, Lotta. She is also just the sweetest, and I think she has a really wonderful sense of design. So this pattern is knit up at a DK weight gauge, and her sample uses her yarn actually. So she does have a yarn shop and some of her own bases and colors that she dyes. This is on her Sagan, I'm not sure. Devonia DK, and for her contrast color, she used a spin cycle dyed in the wool. I think another great option in this pattern would be to sub out your contrast color for hand spun if you are a spinner. I think it would look so beautiful with the color changes. I also think that if you do not want to use a color shifting yarn, the pattern lends itself to being able to either pick a solid color and just use that for your contrast color, or even to use maybe some scraps for each different section of the patterns. But this has 9 sizes, and the body is recommended to be knit on a US 5, so basically it's a 22 stitch gauge. Often with color work, knit in the round especially, people find that they need to go up a size to get a nice stretchy fabric, one that's not super stitched in and tight due to the color work being due to the yarn being stranded along in the rows. If it is small circumference knitting, I find I do need to go up a needle size, and that is mainly in socks. Not even as much on sleeves, but 100% on socks. On socks and with sock yarn, I have got to go up a needle size if I'm knitting on 9-inch circulars. I don't find that on a large circumference sweater, I have any problem with my color work being too tight, especially if it's a nice woolly yarn that has some bounce to it. That always tends to work out pretty well for me. So this sweater is meant to have 2 to 6 inches of positive ease, and it has a finished chest circumference ranging from 35.5 inches up to 70 inches. And I just absolutely love this. Candace had a sample made for the Farmer's Daughter Fibers, and I fell in love with the sample that they have in their yarn, and it's definitely something that I want to knit. I love the fact that it has the really intense color work on the yoke, but it has some super fun, it looks similar to that flea stitch, but maybe it's little pluses. Have to zoom in, but I like the fact that it continues a little bit of color work all over the sleeves and body. I have some of her yarn actually on the DK base. Is it the DK base or the fingering weight? I have some to make her Geometer Cowl, which is the same pattern but in a cowl. And I am very excited to make that. I think I might actually use some hand spun for my contrast color, and then I'm going to use her yarn with some Surrey for my main color. So I'm excited to make that. I really like that motif a lot. Another sweater, which is new, is called the Nightfall sweater. So this is one that recently came out in the new Lana magazine, issue 19, and it is designed by Maxim Sear, aka Max the Knitter. And I think it is absolutely stunning. I love the colors that were chosen for the sample. I love the pattern. I love that it has a stockinette body, but then the pattern continues on the sleeves and near the hem. And I think that these moody colors just look so, so beautiful together. And it is actually knit in this sample using Les Garçons hand-dyed British 4-ply, which is a beautiful, beautiful yarn. I did get to briefly see it at YoungFolk. I wish I would have bought some, but, you know, YoungFolk was YoungFolk, and I have a lot of regrets. Anyway, this has sizes 1 through 9, with a finished chest circumference of 34.25 inches to 66.25 inches. And let me see, the recommended ease is 2 inches to 6 inches. So that has a nice size range, I think. And again, love the colors. So I believe that this uses 4 colorways. And I really would like to pick up that issue of Lina. I don't think it's out yet. Is it released yet? I think it comes out in December, so soon. And I definitely want to pick up that magazine. It has lots of beautiful patterns in it. So another pullover pattern that isn't new, but is on my list, is the Sheep Camp sweater. This is a sweater designed by Jennifer Berg, aka The Native Knitter on Instagram. And I just think it's a real eye dazzler, not to be confused with her eye dazzler pattern. This is a DK weight yarn, and you can knit this up in 2 different colorways. So 1 as your main color and just 1 contrast color. I do believe that the Colorwork stops after you split for sleeves. So once you get through your yoke, you're golden on stockinette with a single color only, and it will probably just fly off the needles. Another thing I really like about this sweater is the collar. I love how she did a sort of rolled hem or I-cord. I can't tell if that's an I-cord or a rolled hem at the top, but I love how it just goes straight into the sweater without the ribbing, and I think that's really cool. I like how even depending on the size sweater that you chose with the different amounts of positive or negative ease, that you could get a different fit where that might even come up a little bit closer to your neck, and I think that could have a really cool look to it. So this comes in a finished bust circumference of 36 inches to 70.5 inches, and that is with an intended ease of 6 to 8 inches. So again, another great size range, and it does not look like there are super long floats in this pattern. There may be, you know, a row here and there that has some longer floats, but for the most part, it looks like some pretty straightforward stranded colorwork knitting, and I like it. It's got a very graphic design to it, and I love it. I want to make it. I have yarn for it, actually. All right, the last pattern in the pullover category I want to share with you is one that I have recently started knitting myself. And that is the Celeste Sweater, which is a pattern by Petite Knit. So this is another DK weight. Gotta love those DK color weights. And it is recommended to be knit on a US 7 for the Colorwork yoke. And then if you need to go down to a 6 for the stockinette body, you can, if that helps you to keep a consistent gauge. I am knitting mine on a US 7 or 4.5 millimeter for my yoke, and then I may or may not go down to a size 6 for my stockinette body. I'm gonna see. I am knitting mine with a mixture of Double Sunday and Peer Gynt that was very kindly sent to me by Smita from Your Next Knit, which is a super fun yarn store in Canada. And so I am loving working on this collaboration with her. So she let me pick out yarn for a project that I wanted to work on, and I immediately knew that I wanted to knit the Celeste sweater. So, well, let me go back. Whenever Petite Knit first started showing some sneak peeks of it, I was like, oh, I like that, but I didn't feel like I had to knit it immediately. And that was whenever she showed it in the darker colors. But then I started seeing it in some lighter colors, and she knit a lighter version with a very neutral white, gray, beige base as her main color. And that's when I really started loving it. And now I love it with the darker bases as well, but I really love it with the creamy beige main color. So I picked out Sunday morning, no, not Sunday morning, that's Sonder. So I picked out some Sunday DK, Double Sunday. I'm going to get it out in a minute. There we go. I got some Double Sunday, which is a DK weight yarn, and it is a non-superwash merino from Sandnes Garn. So this is Double Sunday, and it is 100% merino wool, 50 gram balls, 108 meters, non-superwash, and I love it. It's very soft. It's non-superwash, but it could pass as a superwash without the negative things that sometimes come along with a superwash yarn. It's just very, very soft. The bounce is unreal. It's a very round yarn, and it's a very smooth yarn. I love it. I've used Double Sunday in multiple projects, and I will continue to use it. I absolutely love this yarn. So the other yarn that I am mixing that with is Peer Gynt. So while Double Sunday is my base and probably half of my contrast colors, Peer Gynt is the other half of my contrast colors. Peer Gynt is it's classified as a DK weight yarn from Sandnes Garn, and it's 100% Norwegian wool, non-superwash as well. So this is not as soft as the Double Sunday. It's a little bit crunchier, but it's still not super itchy. It's definitely got more texture than the Double Sunday, and it's a loftier yarn. To me, this is a worsted weight yarn. I could not really use this without going down a needle size in my stockinette body. I pretty much have to use this as a worsted weight yarn in worsted weight patterns. But since I'm only using it for a sprinkling of contrast colors here and there, then it's working out just fine. I actually snapped a picture the other day when I was working on this because I had every other stitch on my needle. One was Double Sunday, one was Peer Gynt, as I was going through a row of Colorwork, and you could really see how much loftier and fuller the Peer Gynt looked. It's a much lighter weight. It feels like it could be woolen spun, but it's not. I mean, I don't think it is. It's just a much lighter, less dense yarn, big time, than the Double Sunday. The Double Sunday is a heavier, smoother, very round and springy yarn. But I highly recommend non-superwash yarns for Colorwork, and anything with some woolly grippiness is just going to be amazing. It's going to hold your stitches in place. When you soak it and block it, it's going to bloom and fill in those spaces and just look absolutely amazing. But I I gotta tell y'all, I love this. I love this pattern. I actually may have yarn to make a second one as well. Do I have 2 test knits due at the end of this month? Yes. Did I instead cast on and knit an entire yoke of the Celeste Sweater? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. The intended ease of this sweater is 6 inches, and it has a finished bust circumference of 37 3/4 inches to 63 inches. So while it is finishing, got a finished bust circumference of 63 inches, technically with a intended ease of 6 inches, then you would be coming in 3 inches short on an intended chest size for size inclusivity, which technically you need to be at 60 inches and above. Depending on the ease that you want, though, I do think that this has a nice range. Next up, I want to share a cardigan that I'm absolutely in love with. I'm sure all of you have seen this cardigan before. Very highly doubt it's going to be new to anybody, but just in case, I have picked out the Heirloom Quilt cardigan. This is a pattern by Katrin Seeberger, and y'all, it's stunning. It's special. It's beautiful. I love it. And it is going to utilize a little bit of intarsia knitting. So this pattern is written at a DK weight gauge, 20 stitches, but she recommends holding fingering weight double, and that way you can use up scraps that you may have. You can mix and match DK and fingering held double to get your squares. And I just think this pattern is really cool. So this is constructed by knitting up lots of single squares of the star quilt pattern. And depending on the size that you want, it will actually change the size of each individual square, if I understand correctly. Then in the end, you will seam all of those squares together, and you will then go back and pick up your stitches to create the ribbing on the hem, the neckline, the button band, and then you will pick up and knit your sleeves. So I think this is a great stash buster. There are only 3 sizes in this, but you have a finished circumference of 50 inches, 70 inches, and 78 3/4 inches. So that has a lot of room to make decisions on how much ease you want. She is definitely chosen a lot of ease. I think she has 34 inches of ease in her sample. She did say that test knitters chose sizes that gave 15 inches to 30 inches of ease, and if you look on the project page, you can see a wide range of different eases and what they look like. I actually kind of think that I would like to do a 70-inch bust because I think I would love a cardigan like this with a lot of ease and maybe semi-cropped. Now, the 50-inch bust would give me basically no ease, very little to no ease at all. And that would work, but it would definitely be a different look. So I'm thinking I might do the 70 inches. I do think that you could modify this pattern by, changing the amount of rows that you have. And you could get some different sizing that way. But I really, really love this. And I am super excited to tell y'all more about the one that I am going to be making which is in a collaboration with Woolly Knit. So they make some really beautiful colors of yarn that you can get on cones in British wool. So I am super excited to be working with them and to knit this cardigan in some of their lovely wool and lovely colors. So stay tuned, and I will be taking you on my journey through this cardigan. I think it might be an investment in time. It might not be a quick knit, but I do really like it, and I think it's special. Okay, next up, let's talk about a hat. There were so many different hats that I absolutely love. I really love Colorwork hats. I think it's a fun way to get colorwork in, but I chose to share a hat with y'all that is mosaic knitting. Again, it's probably not new to anybody, but that's okay. It's still one everybody needs in their wardrobe, and that is the pressed flowers hat. You guessed it. So this is knit at a sport weight gauge, and you can use two contrast, so you can use two colors, one main color and one contrast color, or you could use one main color and utilize a few different scraps to make a little bit of a gradient for your contrast color. And I actually think that would turn out super cute. So I am about to cast this hat on, and I will be knitting it as part of a knit along for the pressed flowers patterns that I'm co-hosting with Ashley from Design by So and So here on YouTube and on Instagram. And for this knit along, you can pick any of the pressed flowers patterns by Amy Christoffers, and you can knit them and post a picture on Instagram using the hashtag #ICanBuyMyselfFlowers Cowl. So the name of our knit along is from the Miley Cyrus song, I Can Buy Myself Flowers. No. The name of the song is Flowers. The name of our knit along is I Can Buy Myself Flowers. But this is a super fun, little cowl, and it started, did it start the first day of November? I think it did. It started sometime at the beginning of November, and it is running through January 31st, which is the last day of January. So this, as I mentioned, is a sport weight mosaic knitting pattern, and it calls for a 28 stitch gauge, recommended needle size US 5 for the body of the hat. And one thing I will say is I have seen quite a few of my friends make this hat, and I have heard it mentioned that it does get a bit long, and I'm not sure if that's because their row gauge got off or what happened, but I am going to be very vigilant in stopping early if I need to make sure that my hat doesn't get too long, because while I love a slouchy hat every now and again, it has to be the right kind, and Colorwork hats are not my favorite slouchy hats, and I don't like extra slouchy. Like, it can only have a baby slouch, just a little bit. I really prefer a more fitted crown when it comes to hats. So I'm going to be watching very closely on my length for this pattern. All right, next up is socks. Speaking of flowers, a pattern that was just released, and I gotta tell y'all, it blew me away. It's absolutely beautiful. Was included in the Knitter magazine issue 195, and it is a pattern by Alex Bird, who I got to meet in person at Rhinebeck, and she was lovely. I was so excited. So these are the Lilac, I'm not exactly sure. But it is a super fabulous fingering weight pattern, knit on US 1 or 2.25 millimeter needles, yes, but most socks are. And it is knit up in John Arbon Textiles Exmoor sock. So I think that makes a really interesting base for a sock. It's definitely got a woolly feel to it, but look at this gorgeous geometric pattern. I mean, it really pops. I love the darker background with a really poppy color used for the contrast. And it's sort of got that Estonian knitting technique to it. In fact, I think it says, yeah, Estonian inlay knitting. So I think this would be a really interesting pattern to make. You would definitely not get bored. And I think it's beautiful. You really can't buy socks like that. It looks like a very fun pattern to knit. Okay, I also have a pair of mittens that I want to share. And what's great about this pattern is that it's free. So this is a pattern you can find on the Purl Soho website, and it is called the Herringbone Mittens. So this is a stranded colorwork pattern knit up in Purl Soho's sport weight yarn, their Posy base. I'm not actually sure they still carry Posy, but there's so many new places to buy sport weight yarn. It used to be a little bit of a harder base to find, but it's becoming much more readily available, and I love it because it's kind of my current favorite weight to work with. I am a very loose knitter, and oftentimes if a pattern calls for DK weight, I find that if I go down to a sport weight, my gauge turns out perfect, especially when it comes to Andrea Mowry patterns, because I specifically tend to knit much looser than she does, and I do knit a lot of her patterns. So I'm loving sport weight just in general whenever it comes to getting DK weight gauges. But the reason I think this is so fun, besides the fact that it's free, is that this has a super fun graphic design. And I love a good geometric pattern in stranded color work. It's very easy to memorize. You can read your knitting very easily. And while this is super fun in high contrast, I mean, the black and white looks spectacular. I would absolutely knit it in black and white. I also think that this would be so fun in some great neutrals like browns and camels and greens and rusts. Yes, those are my neutrals. And I think that this could be very striking, but very classy at the same time. And I love how on the back of the mitten, you've got that really simple, looks like ribbing, but it may just be, stranded color work there, alternating colors. I would have to download the pattern, which I will because it's free. But yeah, those look like some super fun mittens. Okay, last but not least is the love of my life, shawls. And the first one is a new one that was just released this last week. And it is a pattern by Moonstruck Knits on Instagram, aka Natasha Hornsby. And it is called the Artist Shawl. Okay, y'all. It's stunning. She is known for her amazingly beautiful mosaic knitting patterns, and this newest one may be one of her most beautiful yet. It is knit out of a sport weight yarn. She chose Lichen and Lace Rustic Heather Sport, and it is mainly knit on a US 5, it looks like. So you do need 5 different colors for this. It looks like you need about 515 yards for your main color. So most 100 gram skeins of sport weight yarn, you would need 2 of those for that, unless it's a 50 gram skein, which, you know, double that. Looks like the other colors, all the other contrast colors, you could get away most likely with 1 skein of each on a 100 gram sport weight base. And I mean, honestly, it's just beautiful. I think we all need this shawl. We all want this shawl, and the colors she chose are absolutely amazing. It has a wingspan of 69 inches. And a depth of 27.5 inches. And it's just really pretty. I know that she almost always uses charts only. So definitely be familiar with charted knitting patterns if you choose to work this. But it's beautiful. it's beautiful. I don't know what else to say. It's stunning. It's timeless. I love it. All right, y'all, I hope you found some inspiration for your next colorwork project. If colorwork is something that intimidates you, then I would check out an episode that I have that talks all about colorwork. I recorded that maybe last year, but there's some great tips about things that are very important to keep in mind with colorwork, such as what you use as your dominant color and how to keep your dominant color your dominant color. It also talks about how to keep your floats nice and loose, when to catch your floats, how to catch your floats, and something I like to do, which is to knit my stranded colorwork two-handed. So I will pick with my dominant color and I will pick with my dominant color and I will flick with my background color and I will hold them at the same time. And it really speeds up my colorwork knitting. So be sure and check that video out if you want to sort of get a nice rounded viewpoint on all the things you should think about before starting your first colorwork project. If you enjoy videos like this, then make sure and give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss out on any new video content, and it also really helps my channel out so very much. Again, I appreciate you all for being here. I appreciate all of your comments. It means a lot to me to get to go through and read a little note that you leave for me. So thank you so much for that as well. And until next time, happy knitting, y'all.